I have a plan to make our country more energy independent and secure.
Liar, liar, planet's on fire. These are the interesting times. Hello everyone, my name's Matt Johnston and welcome to The Interesting Times, which is a political comedy show from right here in the UK. Rishi Sunak made an announcement on Monday to the country that in the middle of the biggest ecological threat we are facing, he will be handing out oil and gas licenses like Johnson hands out peerages to family members.
There are some who think the way to protect our environment is to abandon British oil and gas. But that doesn't make any sense. Even when we've reached net zero in 2050, a quarter of our energy needs will still come from oil and gas. So where should we get it from? Those like Sir Keir Starmer, who want to ban new licenses, would make us ever more dependent on hostile states like Russia.
I've got to keep my viewing figures up, so I won't make you watch the rest of it. It's basically Rishi Sunak clearly reading off an auto cue with all the charm and disinterest of an automated answer phone in front of a couple of Union Jack blankets while the cameraman tries to work out how the Zoom works. And he's saying that if he doesn't do this, then Keir Starmer will basically telephone Putin to ask when he'd like to invade or something. Utter tosh. But there is one more bit I'd like you to stomach.
I believe that British energy should come from Britain. And I have a plan to make our country more energy independent and secure.
Yes, this is about energy security, which the Energy Minister, Andrew Bowie, was keen to highlight.
This is essentially about our energy security. We think it's right that those fossil fuels, that oil and gas, comes from British waters, using British workers, ensuring that the revenue comes to the British Exchequer, rather than being reliant on hostile foreign actors to import those fossil fuels.
If the message hadn't got through, don't worry, Grant Shapps, the Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero, otherwise known, I'm guessing, as Minister Without Portfolio, made sure the message got across.
This site in Teesside is literally powering Britain. 30% of the gas we produce in the UK comes through here from 30 active fields in the North Sea, travelling 250 miles. But what would happen if it shut down today? It would mean relying on imports to power our cars and heat our home. Importing liquefied natural gas creates 4 times as much carbon as producing it here.
That's right, if we shut down the gas and oil, then we'd all lose colour while being unable to hear each other, as we'd all have tinnitus in the form of dark synthesizer music. So 4 times carbon, 250 miles of paperwork, 30 active fields in the North Sea, all sounds rather good. Just a quick question.
How much of the gas that we produce in the UK is actually sold in the UK and is actually used here?
So there is a mix, that's absolutely true. But what's important here
figures,
is
because it seems that scientists have tried to get these figures out of the government for a long time and have been unable to.
Yes, the reason I can tell you actually, because yesterday I was in Teesside at one of our major gas terminals where they take gas from 30 different fields in the North Sea. And they process it. And I was actually having this discussion with them. The reason why it's a complicated figure is some of it is processed and exported and then refined and re-imported.
Not really that secure then, is it? That's why at airports they ask you if you packed your bag yourself. Rather than did you pack your bag, send it to Norway where it was separated, converted and treated before being sent back.
So gas and oil doesn't flow in a single direction. It also varies all the time with those pipelines that we have set up across the channel, for example. So that's why it's not so straightforward.
So, unsurprisingly, no further understanding of where we are. And despite Grant Shapps talking like he's the boss here and nothing gets done unless he clears it, it's worth pointing out that none of those people work for him. None of them. It's all run by private companies and then sold on to the global market. Expecting Grant Shapps to shut them down is like expecting the Easter Bunny to cancel Christmas. But as you saw from that clip, Shapps was being a little light on detail. And there's a reason for that.
When we trade in oil and gas, even as Britain, we don't get to keep the oil and gas here in Britain that we produce. It gets sold onto an international market. 81% of our oil last year was exported. So it I mean, this isn't just me saying that it won't bring down bills or create environmental security.
This is true. Most of the UK's energy is imported, and so it goes. Most of the stuff we produce here is exported. And it's also true that she definitely isn't the only one saying it. Climate activists are saying it.
And any idea that, new oil and gas is compatible with net zero is just a lie.
The press is saying it.
Because there's no question of sort of British oil coming into Britain at some kind of discount because we're the ones who've sucked it out of the sea.
No, because it's our oil industry is run by private companies, and much of the oil produced in the UK is exported overseas.
And Greg Hans even tweeted about it when he was Energy Minister in 2022. This is just a staggeringly bad idea from the government of bad ideas. It's a bad idea according to businesses. Here is Australian billionaire Andrew Forrest.
Take Britain. I'm a major investor here. If I see this country steering itself over a cliff, backing fossil fuel, I'm going to start pulling out.
It's a bad idea according to world leaders. This is the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres speaking in 2022.
The truly dangerous radicals are the countries that are increasing the production of fossil fuels. Investing in new fossil fuel infrastructure is moral and economic madness.
It's a bad idea according to the Green Party.
The idea that burning fossil fuels in the North Sea is the way to get to net zero is frankly laughable if it didn't have such severe consequences.
And it's a bad idea according to the True Blue Party. This is Conservative MP, a former Energy Minister, Chris Skidmore, the individual responsible for signing net zero into law.
There is a role for oil and gas, no one's saying that, but that's for the existing fields we have now. And I think this is a question of leadership. And if we don't show leadership, everything unwinds.
Show leadership. I would say, don't hold your breath. But the way things are going, you may not have much choice. OK, I do think it's only fair to give Rishi Sunak and this current government the right of reply. So here goes.
While Rishi Sunak argues that extracting more oil and gas will increase homegrown supplies and bring down prices, that's clearly in dispute. And we asked the government to clarify or provide the data to back up these claims. They did not. Instead, they referred us to the Prime Minister's comments today in Aberdeen, which of course repeat those very claims.
The Prime Minister claims it will bring us cheaper energy, but doesn't say how.
We should not take any lectures from anybody about our record. Our record is fantastic. It's better than everyone else's.
Yeah, we're fucked. Or at least we would be. But there are still some superheroes out there that can leap houses in a single bound. Or at least get up on the roof of one. Greenpeace activists targeted the Prime Minister's Yorkshire home whilst he was with his family in America on holiday.
We're here because Rishi Sunak has opened the door for a new drilling frenzy in the North Sea, while large parts of our world are literally on fire. This will be a disaster for the climate. It won't lower your energy bills.
Yeah, we talked about that.
It's not going to boost our energy security.
Yeah, we talked about that too.
The only people that are going to profit from this at all are the big oil companies.
Oh no, we haven't talked about that.
The idea that the government is actually what it's done since Sunak has become Chancellor and Prime Minister, it's actually given huge tax breaks to North Sea oil and put a windfall tax on renewables.
It seems there is big business in the end of the world, and no one knows that better than a Sunak oil salesman himself. Rishi's family, Infosys, had recently signed a $1.5 billion deal with BP. But of course, when it comes to air quality, the new oil and gas licenses weren't the only story going on. The Ulez expansion has split opinion in the outer London areas where it's going to be implemented. So let's break it down. On the one hand, those in favour of the Ulez expansion, Dr. Anna Moore.
Hi, I'm Dr. Anna Moore. I've been a respiratory doctor in London for 12 years. Because air pollution affects all organs in the body, breathing toxic air can cause all sorts of problems, from asthma to cancer to dementia. Patients in my clinic are living with these health effects, including difficult to control asthma, regular chest infections, and sinus and nasal problems causing difficulty in breathing. Air pollution also causes a range of other conditions such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and strokes. We would all be healthier if we breathe cleaner air, and Ulez helps us do that.
Ooh, a proper doctor. And against the Ulez expansion, standing in the field, a proper Charlie.
I'm Charlie Davis and I'm your Conservative candidate for Eltham and Chislehurst, and we've been out Well, Belmont Open Space today campaigned against the Mayor's plan to extend the ultra-low emission zone to the London boundary. Now this week we had the disappointment of the High Court judgment going against our plans to stop the expansion, but I think it's still incredibly important. You look here, there's no issues with air pollution in areas of Chislehurst, and so I think it's really important that we send a message to the Mayor of London and tell him to scrap his plan to extend the ultra-low emission zone.
Who'd have believed? No doubt the public will have a say in this, and for Charlie Davis, the Conservative candidate for the newly formed constituency of Eltham and Chislehurst, things aren't looking great for Charlie to get elected. But that's good news for the Tories, as Charlie used to be a senior fraud specialist. Whew. Bullet dodged there, fellas. Wait a minute. If Rishi Sunak's on holiday, who's running the country? Oh, fuck.
I'm actually going off on holiday this afternoon. So I will. The country will be left in the capable hands of the Deputy Prime Minister.
Yes, we have been placed into the careless midst of Oliver Dowding, who has to be the worst Deputy Prime Minister I can think of. And I can think of Dominic Raab. Oliver Dowding was brought front and centre to talk about Bibby Stockholm, one of the two barges brought in to house asylum seekers. It can house 220 individuals safely. So the Tories are planning to put in 506 people. The facilities include Wi-Fi and an on-site nurse. An on-site nurse is actually a necessity. And the rooms do have a TV, although that's not wired in, making it more of a crap mirror, really. But none of these are the biggest problem. The corridors are excessively small, the rooms are cramped, and as we've seen before, if there's a fire, it's likely to be a problem. The Fire Brigade Union themselves have been pretty vocal about the dangers involved.
People drawing comparisons to the Grenfell Tower fire, I'm sure you have, and also the Hillsborough disaster. And I think one similarity is that prior to the Grenfell Tower fire, many concerns were being raised by many groups, including the Fire Brigade Union, about fires in high-rise buildings. Those concerns were largely ignored, and it saw the loss of 72 innocent lives. We don't want to be in that case right now. We feel like we're looking down the barrel of another possible disaster. We believe it to be a death trap, and we believe it's another accident waiting to happen. And we make no apology for making our concerns known. We're going to write to the Home Office today to set out our concerns.
Oliver Dowding himself responded to this warning with all the warmth of I can't think of a comparison. Yes, I can. With all the warmth of a privately educated smug-faced tosser who never had to understand what it was like to flee for their lives in order to avoid certain death or torture, leaving behind friends and family and everything they've ever known, for example.
Just to press you on the barge, because there has been a lot of concern about that. Are you satisfied there's no fire safety issues? Because the Fire Brigades Union are very worried about that concern.
Well, of course, we'll take into account those concerns, and that's exactly what we're doing. I would just gently say the Fire Brigades Union has donated £850,000 to the Labour Party since 2010.
And I would, of course, gently remind the Deputy Prime Minister that the Fire Brigade are experts in their field and not the only ones raising concerns about this. I would also not so gently remind the Deputy Prime Minister that Boris Johnson gave an OBE to the Northern manager of CTM, who had been handed a £1.5 billion contract for this national piece of shame. And I would also forcibly remind the Deputy Prime Minister until his eyes watered that if his party had funded the various immigration departments properly, we might not be in this mess. And that's it. No time to talk about Brexit.
Everyone in the world in the advanced economies are facing low growth, partly because of demographic problems, partly because of the row with China and Russia. We are perhaps worse, but it's slightly self-inflicted. Remember, Brexit had the adverse economic effects that many economists, including me, always thought it would have.
Oh, I mean, not Brexit.
Long before Brexit, it's actually been a strong feature of our economy. But what it does mean...
But you're not saying Brexit hasn't been a factor in inflation.
I think you need to look at the figures. I mean, you always try and persuade me that Brexit has been a factor. You need to look at the numbers here. The fact is that it's to do with those factors. It's to do with the high energy prices, the food imports, the tight labour market.
See, it's nothing to do with Brexit. It's just food imports as a result of us putting in extra checks after leaving the European Union and stopping freedom of movement, which we brought in after leaving the EU. So can we please stop talking about Brexit?
As Brussels finalises controversial scheme, etc., etc., it's stubborn Brussels bureaucracy holding things up. Well, yes, because we chose to leave the EU.
What did I just say? No time to talk about Talk TV host and member of the House of Lords, in her dreams, and mid-Bedfordshire squatter Nadine Dorries, who is holding on to her seat harder than she's ever held on to anything in her life. Almost. Flitwick Council wrote her to request that she step down, and the council is situated in mid-Bedfordshire, unlike Nadine Dorries, who moved out due to security concerns and hasn't held a surgery there for over 3 years, also due to security concerns. Blimey, how rough is mid-Bedfordshire? Lord Daniel Moynihan went on to LBC to defend her.
I think that Nadine Dorries is allowed to change her mind, and perhaps she should do a little bit more work. Perhaps she should appear in the House of Commons a little bit more often, but I wouldn't be one to criticise her.
This is a man who backed Brexit, called Johnson a truthful person, and said that Yorkshire is basically full of whingers begging for handouts. And he's still in the House of Lords. Ha! Suck on that, Nadine. Actually, no, don't. And no time to talk about Joe Pasquale nearly dying on stage. Doesn't he every night? Just kidding, Joe. Joe was doing a routine at Skegness and nearly impaled himself on a pair of moose antlers. Apparently during the routine, Joe puts on the antlers on his head and says, "I put too much moose in my hair." I think you might need some new material, Joe. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you're enjoying these videos, please do like, subscribe, comment, share, and if you haven't enjoyed these videos, then what are you still doing watching it? And I'll see you soon. Take care.